What's up, you guys? It's Devin from CenturyFX Studios, and we're back with another video. Today we're going to be talking about how to get blurry backgrounds. Specifically to this question that I got from a viewer. He or she asks, I got a 70 Mark 1 or a Mark 2 and a 50mm 1.8. How do I get blurry backgrounds? I'm shooting wide and I'm still getting everything in focus. Well, the first question that I will ask you is, what is your aperture? What aperture are you shooting on? Just because you have a 50mm 1.8 doesn't mean that you're going to shoot blurry backgrounds. Every lens has the shallow depth of field end, and they have the more focused end of the lens. So you have the ability to shoot from 1.8 all the way to like f12, f11, f16. All of these more focused aperture ends. So my question is, are you shooting at 2.8? Are you shooting at 1.8? Are you shooting at 2.0? Are you shooting at the shallow depth of field lens aperture settings? Also, what do you have everything else set to? Are you shooting on aperture priority or shutter priority? Are you shooting at on a sports mode or an automatic mode? Because automatic modes tend to give you the best setting that it thinks it needs for the situation, not necessarily a shallow depth of field aperture. It's going to give you something that it thinks is going to work for the situation that you're in. So, and also, what is your subject? What are you shooting? And you said you were shooting wide. Well, if you're shooting a crop frame sensor like the 7D, well, the 7D is always going to have a crop factor on it. So that means if you get a 50mm, you're looking at actually 80mm. So it's hard to actually say that you're shooting wide at any point in time with that lens. So those are some of the things to think about. Probably your best bet is to shoot on manual or aperture priority, because aperture priority says, okay, you choose the aperture and I'll fix the rest. So if you choose the aperture 1.8 and you shoot at 1.8, then it's going to choose the right ISO and the right shutter value to compensate for the exposure that you choose on your exposure compensation dial. Now, if some of these things are sounding foreign to you, I would look up the definition for exposure compensation. I would also look up the definition for aperture priority, shutter priority, and manual. These are the three modes that most, I think, professional photographers use to get the certain settings that they want. That's the first thing you want to do, is make sure what you're doing also is in focus. Make sure what you're filming or taking a picture of is in focus. Is it in focus? Lock your focus, know your focus, because if you're shooting at 1.8, which you need to be shooting at to get that blurry background, then you're going to miss focus really easily on that subject or whatever you're shooting. So make sure that you have it locked on focus. Like right now, I'm shooting at 50mm at 1.4. This video, it's more than just a picture, but the same concepts apply. Where if you're shooting a video or picture or anything like that, you need to lock focus. That's why I'm using the 80D, because the 80D can track my face, no matter where I go. So it's supposed to be tracking my face right now. Hopefully it's working. It looks to be working on my LCD screen right here that I can flip out and look at myself while it's tracking me. But with all that being said, make sure your apertures on 1.8 or 2.0 or 2.8, so on and so forth. A shallow aperture, like a higher number. The closer you get to 1, the shallower depth of field or the more blurry the background is going to become. And then make sure you're getting tack sharp focus, because a lot of times people want to shoot at 1.8. Oh, 1.8, 1.8 blurry background. Well, make sure you maintain focus with that blurry background, because you can throw an eye out of focus really easy at 1.8 and 1.2. Now, since you have a crop frame sensor, it's not as hard as it is on a full frame sensor, but it still does happen. You can throw your background out of focus, but also your subject out of focus as well. So make sure those two things are working. And this is just a short little quick tips video. This is by no means telling you all the ways you can get a blurry background. You can also get a blurry background by backing up and zooming in on your subject, isolating your subject to 1/3 of the image and stuff like that. So there's a whole bunch of different ways where you can actually make your background look effective. You can bring your subject close to the lens, as close as you can, focusing on it, because the lens has about a 1.5 foot focusing distance on it. So bring that subject all the way to the closest focus distance that your camera can focus on with that lens attached, and then take a picture, and then and make some room for the background in your composition, and you should be able to have a blurry background that suits your needs and things of that nature. That's what I did on that video that you saw. I brought the subject, the wooden log, really close to the edge of the frame, and the edge of the focal distance. So it's like 1 foot away from the lens. It's really, really close. The closer you bring your subject and focus on that subject that's close, the more blurry the background becomes, no matter what lens you have. Now, with the 1.8 lens, if you're shooting at 1.8, you're going to get the full effect of a shallow depth of field lens or a portrait lens, where it blurs out the background and it puts in focus the foreground. But those are some quick tips, guys. It's just mainly about aperture, compression, how far away you have your subject, what are you focused on, how far are you away from your lens, your subject is away from your lens. The closer you can get to your subject and focus on them, the more shallow the background is going to be, or the more blurry the background is going to be. That's a lesson in compression. You can also back up and zoom in, but since you have a prime lens, you can't do that. But if you had a zoom lens, say for instance a 24-105 or 18-135 STM lens, then you can back up and get way more compression than you could out of, say for instance, a 1.8. Now the background might not be as blurry, but you can get a really, really compressed background, which really calms down the background in a sense. It makes everything look bigger and blowier in the background, if, for lack of a better word. But compression is a good technique to use when you're trying to blow out the background and get it more effective. That was CenturyFX Studios. Thanks for watching the video. I forget your name, but your name should be in the comment when I post it on the video. Stay tuned for the next videos on CenturyFX Studios.